Where is the secret Egyptian city hidden in the forbidden zone of Grand Canyon? I'll give you an answer by the end of this video, but it may not be what you expect. Grand Canyon is a massive geological wonder visible from outer space. It attracts 5 million visitors a year, so it would not be surprising that it attracted worldly and perhaps otherworldly visitors over the millennia. And many interesting legends arise from the canyon. The Egyptian cave story is an attractive one. In 1909, an intrepid adventurer named G.E. Kincaid made a solo boat journey down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. He stumbled upon a cave high above the Colorado River with the most amazing contents. The cave complex, hewn from solid rock, contained several hundred rooms almost a mile below the earth, with passageways radiating out like spokes on a wheel. It was Egyptian in style, with hieroglyphics and a shrine with an idol that resembled Buddha. It also contained swords, tools made of copper, and vessels of gold, something never before found at American archaeological sites. Additionally, there was a burial chamber with tiers of mummies, apparently warriors of this tribe. Kincaid even photographed one of the mummies. The discovery was unprecedented. The unnamed author of the newspaper article, perhaps Kincaid himself, said, quote, "Egypt and the Nile and Arizona and the Colorado will be linked by a historical chain running back to ages which staggers the wildest fancy of the fictionist," close quote. And perhaps with a bit of a creative flourish, the article claims the venerable Smithsonian Institute, through Professor S.A. Jordan, was exploring the site with electric lights and an increasing staff of 30 to 40 people. So the question arises, is this story true? And if so, where is the cave located? Kincaid relates that the cave is along the Colorado River, 42 miles upriver from El Tovar Crystal Canyon. Now, this is a puzzling location. In 1909, the El Tovar Hotel was 4 years old, providing food and lodging to wealthy visitors, as well as crystalware and fine dining. Is this location a bit of a creative pun? There is a Crystal Creek located not so far from the El Tovar, and if you work your way upriver from that location and trusted Kincaid's story and measurements, that would put the cave around mile 56, near the confluence of the Colorado and Little Colorado rivers, and potentially smack in the forbidden zone of Grand Canyon. The plot thickens, or does it? Before searching for the secret city, I think it's valuable to examine the original source of the story to see if it's credible. Perhaps anything a newspaper prints is reliable, and that's how we all know that Hillary Clinton gave birth to a two-headed baby fathered by a space alien. There are troubling inconsistencies in the story. First, Kincaid claims to be the first white person born in Idaho, an honor that belongs to the daughter of a Presbyterian missionary born in 1837. But maybe that was a forgivable exaggeration. Next, Kincaid claims to have navigated the Colorado River in a wooden boat solo. On the same untamed river, combat veteran and explorer John Wesley Powell used a crew of 10 men and 4 boats, losing 2 crew members and almost his life due to challenging conditions. It took Powell 3 months to end the journey around the Nevada border. Kincaid claims to have gone solo all the way to Yuma, Arizona, double the distance, with the sole problem being the loss of an oar. Something just does not ring true. Coincidentally, Kincaid includes information about the newly built Laguna Dam in Yuma, something perhaps picked up from a newspaper to add credibility to the tale. But why would you go over a dam when you had reached the end of your journey? Further, if Kincaid had just made this incredible discovery, why did he wait until arriving in Yuma to mail artifacts to the Smithsonian? Why didn't he do that hundreds of miles earlier in Kingman, Arizona, or some other town along the river served by a post office? And speaking of timing, the story is substantially eroded by the fact the same newspaper printed a brief account of Kincaid's journey 3 weeks earlier, saying he traveled with a camera and took over 700 photos, and the most interesting part of the journey was passing through the sluiceways of Laguna Dam. One wonders how the camera and 700 photographic plates made it safely through the rapids of the Colorado. And although he reported his trip to the paper, he didn't bother to mention his incredible discoveries. Perhaps the first article was a test run or an inspiration for the tale that followed. Next are puzzling issues in his account of the cave. There were hieroglyphics, as well as Buddhist and Tibetan-like artifacts, and links to Native American creation stories. That seems like a curious mix. The cave itself was discoverable by eagle-eyed Kincaid, but not to any of the other river runners of the past 115 years. Also, there were good maps of the Grand Canyon available in 1909, yet Kincaid described the cave as being 42 miles upriver from El Tovar Crystal Canyon, a place that conveniently does not exist. The measurements Kincaid provides for the cave are oddly specific, 854 feet by 634 feet. Perhaps a trick to make it sound scientific or more believable? For a man who claims to have taken 700 photos on the trip and to have taken a photo of himself with a mummy, it's odd that no photos survived. And have you ever asked yourself why almost all of the images linked to the story nowadays are produced by AI? Finally, his flight of fancy about the involvement of the Smithsonian may be the greatest flaw. He claims to have worked for the Smithsonian for 30 years and that explorations involving electric lights and 30 to 40 men were underway. But the Smithsonian has no record of Kincaid, the professor he claims explored the cave, or any budget for the project. Further, there's no record anywhere of either man having existed. Now, maybe two men could have had bags slipped over their heads and been disappeared, but an entire project of the scope described would certainly have left behind some witnesses. Yet, none have emerged. And the expert cited as authority at the end of the article, he speculated that Egyptians may have originated in East India, not from the Native American Indians as Kincaid claimed. The story has elements that make it sound like the work of an imposter, a hoaxer. And there was such a hoaxer, a man named Mulhattan who, for more than 30 years, tricked newspapers throughout the US into running outlandish stories about discoveries of caves full of amazing artifacts from ancient civilizations. The New York Times cited him as one of the best-known hoaxers in the US. His Crystal Cave story, published in a national newspaper in 1879, sounds familiar. Quote, "They discovered an immense room. At a distance of about 3 miles, 6 mummies were found on a ledge of rocks. They were reposing in stone coffins, crudely constructed, and presented every appearance of the Egyptian mummies." Close quote. Sound familiar? And guess where Mulhattan was living at the time of the Grand Canyon Cave story? Arizona. Finally, the reaction of other newspapers to this earth-shattering discovery is informative. This discovery in 1909 would be like man walking on the moon. But no major newspaper published this story, and there were no follow-ups in the paper that did. Only one small newspaper reprinted it without comment, and all of the other papers in Arizona and in the world ignored it. All but one, that is. One week later, the Coconino Sun printed an article titled, "Looks Like a Mohattan Story." Yeah, that's the name of the hoaxer. They said, quote, "The reported discovery of a mammoth underground city of an ancient race in the Grand Canyon seems to be a splendid piece of imagination sent out by some Mohattanized individual. The man who wrote up the find certainly had to dig some for the details and was wise in locating the entrance at a point on a sheer wall where no one but a person with a great imagination could reach it." I like the Egyptian city story. The conspiratorial cover up is interesting, and it's not that I don't like these concepts, but I don't think the story is true. Sadly, I believe the location of the Egyptian cave in Grand Canyon is in the imagination of the story's creator. This doesn't mean that I think there are no cover ups and that the government always tells us the truth. But in the case of the secret Egyptian cave at Grand Canyon, I believe that to be the case. And sure, there are suspicious activities by the park, like redacted documents about closed areas. There are heavy-handed closures of all the caves, the place where people would look to prove or disprove the existence of secret cities. I sure wish the Park Service would at least allow limited exploration of these caves, but they do not. And then there are fun stories like black helicopters protecting the forbidden zones. Of course, in this world of cell phones, there never has been a picture of these helicopters, but they do make a great embellishment of the secret cave story. And finally, there's a further issue of what great benefit would the government gain by going to all the trouble to suppress this information? But putting those issues aside, I think the secret cave story fails upon closer examination of the 1909 source of the story. I've included the text of the relevant newspaper articles in the comments below. Please let me know what you think, and thank you for watching.